The honourable member for Scarborough Southwest.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank the member for his speech on this bill. Now, he referred to the lack or the inability to bring forward permanent funding to help this program move forward. And then, of course, the not putting forward the recommendation on establishing national standards. And certainly, that would touch on provincial jurisdictions. But my question is, how hard did the government actually try to work with the provinces to see if there was a deal that could be reached in order to ensure that there would be national standards across the entire country?
Comments, the honourable member for Scarborough Southwest.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And at several points tonight, reference has been made to the RCMP's comments at committee saying that they themselves would have enough resources to bring in these changes to the witness protection programs. However, as we know, oftentimes when cases are made, it actually falls to provincial or in some cases municipal programs to actually pay for the witness protection. And of course, they're not going to have enough resources. So while the RCMP may have enough resources, provincial and municipal police forces and governments may not. And I just wanted to ask the member perhaps why that wasn't necessarily taken into consideration in bringing this bill forward.
Honourable member for Scarborough Southwest.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to thank the previous colleague for his remarks. However, I'd just like to refute the last statement he made in regards to people always saying they need more money. Time and time again tonight, we've heard Conservative members talk about how the RCMP said they didn't need more financing, which just refutes exactly what the member just said. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm rising this evening, like everyone else, to speak to Bill C-51, an act to amend the Witness Protection Program Act. The NDP supports C-51 as it attempts to improve the Witness Protection Program. However, we still have concerns about this bill. We're concerned that the Conservative government has refused to commit any new funding to the system. We're concerned that the Conservatives' requirement that the RCMP and local police departments work within their existing budgets will hinder the potential improvement of the program. This situation is similar to other legislation we have seen before this House lately, namely the Conservative government bringing forward legislation that only partially fixes the problem. Now, why is this government unwilling or unable to find the courage and political will to develop legislation to the point where it would actually be as effective as it could be? Once again, I find myself supporting legislation that is a half measure. It will in fact help, but does not fully solve a problem that the government could be resolving. Now, Mr. Speaker, another shortcoming of the bill is that it does not include provisions for an independent agency to operate the program as recommended in the Air India Inquiry Report. The RCMP will continue to be responsible for the program, and this leaves the RCMP in a potential conflict of interest in being the agency both investigating the case and deciding who gets protection. The Federal Witness Protection Program has long been criticized for its narrow eligibility criteria, for poor coordination with provincial programs, and low numbers of witnesses actually admitted to the program. Only 30 out of 108 applications considered were accepted in 2012. And the blame for that, Mr. Speaker, has to go to the original authors of the bill, which would be the previous Liberal government. Now, since the Witness Protection Program Act passed in 1996, the Liberal and Conservative governments have done little to respond to the criticisms of the system. While some bills have been presented in the House of Commons to address small components of the protection program, and I'll use it as an example, Bill C-223 from a Reform Member of Parliament in 1999 regarding witness protection in cases of domestic violence, which was supported by the NDP, however defeated by the then Liberal government. The overarching issues of eligibility, coordination and funding have not yet been addressed. The NDP is on record repeatedly asking the government to address the three key issues in the Witness Protection Program: expanded criteria eligibility, cooperation with provinces, and adequate funding. In November 2012, the NDP Member of Parliament from Trinity Spadina called for more support for the Federal Witness Protection Program pointing to the difficulty Toronto police have faced in convincing witnesses to this past summer's mass shooting at a block party on Danzig Street in Scarborough to come forward. The Danzig shooting is just one of many examples I could point to where witnesses have been reluctant to step forward due to concerns for their own safety. Bill C-51 proposes a better process to support provincial witness protection programs and expands the program to other agencies with national security responsibilities. C-51 will expand the eligibility criteria of the witness protection program to include various requests from the RCMP, such as including youth gang members, by covering a new group of people who give assistance to federal departments. Federal departments and agencies with a mandate relating to national security, national defense, or public safety will also be able to refer witnesses to this program. It will also extend the period for emergency protection and clear up some technical problems in coordinating with provincial programs. Provinces such as Ontario and Alberta have been pushing for a national revamp of the witness protection program, including more recognition of their existing programs. C-51 provides for the designation of a provincial or municipal witness protection program so that certain provisions of the Act apply to such a program. It also authorizes the Commissioner of the RCMP to coordinate at the request of an official of a designated provincial or municipal program the activities of federal departments, agencies, and services in order to facilitate a change of identity for persons admitted to the designated program. C-51 includes enough improvements to warrant our support, though through third reading, though concerns about funding, which have been reiterated multiple times in committee and again over and over again tonight, yet still no answers from the government on that, have not been addressed by the Conservatives. Expanding eligibility for the Witness Protection Program is a generally popular policy. Those working to combat youth gangs feel allowing those seeking to leave gangs access to the program will be an important addition to the tools they need. This issue retains a high profile as well in the South Asian community due to the attacks on witnesses during the Air India inquiry, where witnesses who are not eligible for the program, as it currently excludes witnesses in national security cases. The provinces have long been calling for better coordination between federal and provincial programs. Now, of course, Mr. Speaker, in terms of coordination between federal and provincial programs, we know that this is, in fact, a weakness of the current government. When you look at the Prime Minister, who has refused to meet with the First Ministers as a group over the 7 years that they Conservatives have been in power. And we are also, Mr. Speaker, disappointed that the bill did not include more recommendations from the Air India inquiry, such as a more transparent and accountable process for admissions into the program. Even the government itself identified this as a serious problem, and yet they failed to address it in the bill. Overall, C-51 is a positive step, but unfortunately we do not see the Conservatives providing the resources to make it really count for communities. We want to see them provide local police departments with the support necessary to make sure that witnesses come forward in gang situations, for example. The Conservative government is not acknowledging the high cost borne to local police departments. There are also provincial witness protection programs, but if the crime is federal in nature or involves drugs, the RCMP takes over and then charges local police departments the full cost, something many local departments can't afford, particularly in small communities, Mr. Speaker. The RCMP's own website states, and I quote, "There are instances when the cost of witness protection may impede investigations, particularly for small law enforcement agencies." And I have not heard one member of the government speak to addressing that issue here tonight. While the NDP has been calling for changes to the witness protection program since 2007, it is just now that the Conservative government is responding to our concerns, as well as many stakeholder concerns. The NDP would like to believe the Conservative government is committed to improving the witness protection program, but without the necessary funding for the RCMP to carry out these changes, we fear the improvements that are needed will not necessarily materialize. Now, of course, Mr. Speaker, when I'm speaking of resourcing, there were several witnesses in the RCMP committee said that they, in fact, do believe that they have the resources to take care of their share of the burden. However, as I mentioned previously in my speech, local law enforcement agencies and indeed provincial law enforcement agencies are going to end up bearing many of the costs that are associated with changes in the witness protection program. And we've seen this kind of approach time and time again with the Conservatives' crime agenda, where they go and make changes to legislation that are going to impact provincial and municipal budgets without providing any of the funding that's required to actually give them the tools to absorb the costs. So what ends up happening, Mr. Speaker, it's an insidious form of downloading where instead of the costs being borne out of federal changes, being borne by the federal government, federal changes end up being borne by the provinces, by municipalities who are already straining in a much greater extent than the federal budget is. And, Mr. Speaker, it's very unfortunate to see this kind of approach continue. Back in the 1990s, first with the Liberal government downloading billions of dollars onto the provinces, and then in provinces like mine in Ontario, where we had the Mike Harris government, then proceeded to download provincial costs like social services, welfare programs onto municipalities without actually giving them the funds to address the issues. It's sad to see here in 2013 that we in fact are seeing the same kind of things happening. So while the NDP does support this bill, once again we are seeing a bill that we do not think addresses all the issues that could be addressed in the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Southwest.
I'd like to thank my colleague for the question. We'll have to see, according to the last intervention from the Liberals, the member for Montreal said that they saw no problem with this bill. And I'm wondering why, because we saw a lot of problems with this bill. So we're just wondering if they perhaps didn't do their homework, or is it just that they're denying that a bill that they created in the 90s had problems even then. So I'm wondering why the Liberals are even here. They don't even want to debate the bill. They just want to complain about the cost. The fact that democracy costs money. We're here to study the issue and to raise the problems that exist within this bill to ensure that Canadians know that everything isn't perfect.
Honourable Member for Scarborough Southwest.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and certainly seeing and thank you to my colleague for the question. And certainly when I addressed these issues before, in speaking to making sure that there are additional resources for witness protection that are provided to municipal governments and municipal police forces, to provincial agencies, in order to beef up their own witness protection programs, or in instances, for instance, to make a change so that when the RCMP takes over an investigation or witness protection because, say, a crime involves drugs, that they don't pass along all the costs onto the municipal or provincial governments, that they would actually bear the costs themselves or to help actually pay for it. That would be one suggestion. Of course, another bill that we're going to be speaking of soon, Bill C-56, which are amendments to copyright and counterfeiting, those changes, bring up border issues as well. The member quite rightly says that there's been cuts to Canadian Border Services. We're not doing any service to our neighbours right now where and our neighbours to the south in particular, where CBSA is not even tracking outbound shipments of drugs anymore. This certainly isn't helping to make their streets safer, nor is it making our streets safer, because we know that when drugs get exported, oftentimes the resources, the money that's gained from those illicit activities comes back to Canada in the form of other drugs, guns, and money that goes to organized crime. So we should be making sure to stop as much as we can from crossing over the border. Cuts to drug sniffing dogs, cuts to frontline services at border services. It doesn't make any sense when we're trying to fight crime, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate.